A very good evening and welcome to The Bottom Line, a wrap of some of your top business news stories of the day. My name is Ngulube and we begin as usual with your number of the day. Today that number is $13.13 billion US. That, according to US Trade number, is the value of trade between the United States and South Africa for 2019. South Africa ranked number 39 in total trade value in 2019, with a total of $13.13 billion as our number of the day. Exports totaled over $5 billion and imports totaled over $7 billion. While that number could change because the United States Trade Representative's Office has narrowed its internal list of developing and least developed countries. South Africa, India, Brazil and China are on that list. Let's find out about more what this could mean. I'm joined in studio by Mxolisi Ngulube. He is a researcher of international economic law and policy. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. What does the World Trade Organization define as a developing country?
Good evening, Zinga. That's quite a difficult question because currently the WTO does not have a defined list as to what is a developing country. What it does have is a list of least developing countries, and that list is based on the UN system. However, when it comes to developing and developed countries, it doesn't have a set list. What it has done over the last 25 years, it has said to WTO members, you've got a right to self-determine. So each member chooses for itself that to be regarded as either developing or developed. For example, South Africa is an interesting case. Before 1995, we classified ourselves as a developed country under GATT. But during the negotiations, we then decided that we would like to be classified under developing countries. So over the last 25 years, that's what we've been classified as.
Okay. So the United States, that's one of the things that they're saying is that South Africa is not a developing country because they cannot be developing if they are part of the G20. What do you make of that?
I feel like that reason in and of itself is not enough. But it's what the United States is arguing, or rather what the trade representative of the United States is arguing, is making a very valid point. Because if you look at a number of factors as to what speaks to a developing and a developed country, we sort of move between those two. We sometimes, when it's most convenient for us, we then choose to be classified as developing. But for all intents and purposes, we want to play with the big players. We want to play with the Chinas of this world, Brazil and other big economies, and rightfully so, because we've got some of the leading banking industries, financial services. However, of course, there are parts of the economy, such as health services, that are down there at the bottom of some of the poorest countries in the world. So I think what's necessary in our case is for us to decide on a classification and stick to it. And so the United States is really poking holes. It's something that we ourselves have brought to ourselves.
Okay, so what's the effect of that narrowing of that list by the United States Trade Representative's Office?
Essentially, it means that as of this year, we won't be able to be treated like one of the poor countries in the WTO. This means that if we, for example, we have some countervailing duties imposed on us, those countervailing duties, we won't be subject to the de minimis rule. There's currently a de minimis rule that's only applied to developing countries and least developing countries. This means that they are allowed more room and more flexibility with regards to certain behaviors within the trading system. However, if you leave that list, you are now no longer obliged to those benefits. That's essentially where we are. We are now treated like any other member of the WTO.
So talk to us more about that de minimis rule and what it means.
So the de minimis rule means that, for example, should our government help a few companies or a few industries with regards to exports into the United States, the United States Trade Representative can, if it suspects that the so-called export subsidies have been really high, initiate countervailing duty, or initiate firstly an investigation. Upon the findings of that investigation, then initiate countervailing duties. So it means now, unlike in the past, where we allowed a lot more flexibility, we could sort of test the rope, where we could go beyond that 2% de minimis rule. Now, if we meet that 2% de minimis rule, we are definitely in the red zone. The United States can now then initiate countervailing duties against us.
So if someone is watching and they are not a lawyer or a law student, yes, what does that mean, and what's the difference between that in terms of a developing country and a developed country?
Well, it just means that our government can't then assist us as it normally would in certain industries with export subsidies, but also it means that now, unlike in the past, where because our government assisted us a lot more in some industries, that meant the exports to the United States could be higher. You're most likely going to have lower exports than you ordinarily would have had in the past. So that's the first effect that a non-legal person might be concerned with.
What US President Donald Trump has also reportedly spoken about is his unhappiness with the fact that China is defined as a developing country. And he says, well, the United States might as well be a developing country as well.
He makes a valid point. For the first time, I find myself agreeing with Trump, which is very uncommon. Because, and again, remember I said earlier, each country gets to self-determine and self-identify as developing or developed country. And so as a result, what we've seen over the years is that the likes of China and Brazil have then opted to be regarded as a developing country for the benefits that they have because of that. So, and in order to understand, there's a history here. The WTO sort of invented this special and differential treatment for developing countries and least developing countries so that they could be afforded better treatment in certain industries, because there's an appreciation that they are not quite there in terms of development and compared to other countries. But over the years, we've seen other countries exploit this. And China arguably has been probably the #1 country that has exploited this. China is one of the biggest economies in the world. One of the non-traditional economies, of course, because it's a non-market economy, but it's still one of the biggest economies in the world. But now what you have is you have China essentially saying to us that it's literally in the same status as Zimbabwe or any one of our neighboring countries that is poor. So I think Donald Trump, for the first time in his life, actually makes sense.
Mxolisi Ngulube joining us in studio there. He's a researcher on international economic law and policy. Thanks so much for your time on the SABC News tonight.